This time on 4x4 Garage, we're back at Ian's shop with not one, but two really cool rigs from Cummins. Last time on 4x4 Garage, Ian and I took on a really ambitious build, building a Colorado from nothing for ultimate adventure.
This time in the shop, it's going to be kind of cool because we're starting with this Jeep TJ from Cummins.
This is a really special vehicle owned by Cummins. It was actually the test mule to develop the R2.8 Cummins turbo diesel program.
Helping us in the shop today, we've got Steve Standers from Cummins. Steve has worked around these R2.8s a lot and knows his way around this one in particular.
So this Jeep we bought when we were pitching the Crate Engine program inside of Cummins.
This is like the original Jeep TJ that had the Cummins R2.8 underneath the hood. The problem is this Jeep is just a little bit worn out. So Cummins gave me a call, a couple ideas about how to sort of bring this vehicle back, and kind of gave me free rein with what I wanted to do. And I decided that the best thing to do would be to turn it into an LJ. Step one on this build is actually pretty simple. You know, we're really only keeping the drivetrain out of the original TJ. So we're gonna save the R2.8 because it's still good.
Okay.
All right.
We've got the R2.8 here. This is the original test mule engine. It's got who knows how many miles on it. We do want to address a couple things with this. High mileage transmission. This is the original MV3550. They've always been noisy. It's old, worn out, needs a rebuild. We actually like the AX15 a little better than these, so we're going to update it to an AX15. We've got our MP231 T-case. I think for now we're going to leave it. We're not going to do low gears or anything in there. We'll put a fixed yoke kit on this one, rebuild it, and make sure it's good to go for another 250,000 miles. Well, now that we got this out, we're gonna actually roll the Jeep outside. We're gonna get our new frame in here and start working on that, start mocking this in place and getting all the build suspension, everything going.
The whole point about a Cummins engine in a vehicle is whether it's like, you know, you can get a Ram with a Cummins in it, or this particular Jeep that's got a Crate R2.8, is the fact that, you know, Cummins has such a huge, long history in that diesel engine world. All the technology that's in those huge engines that are in ships and trains and semi-trucks that get like 1,000,000 miles, all that technology is also applied to the smaller engines. And by smaller, you know, that's like a 6.7 that you find in a pickup truck. So you can buy a pickup, a Ram with a 6.7 underneath the hood, or a Titan with a 5-liter under the hood like I have, and you know that you have that peace of mind that engine is gonna last the life of the truck, and in the case of this TJ, outlast the vehicle itself. So, you know, it always just sort of carries that iconic high mileage, good power, great engine, reliability. That's kind of what the Cummins brand is all about.
The factory frame was completely rotted. You could grab chunks of it off with your hand. It was just crumbly. Ian went and sourced a new TJ frame. It doesn't have any rust on it, nice and solid. I'm gonna start cutting all the brackets and stuff we're not gonna use off of this thing. We'll lengthen it to LJ length, and then we'll start assembling our suspension, axles, and chassis in it.
Just because we're building the Jeep doesn't mean we have to do the usual, which is throw 1-ton axles underneath it and 40-inch tall tires. Now we know the end tire for this vehicle is gonna be around a 37-inch tall tire, so a good set of Dana 44s will work perfectly in this application. It'll actually also help keep the overall weight of the vehicle down. Now, a real popular upgrade for a TJ or an LJ is to swap in these Jeep JK axles. So what I have here is a complete JK Dana 44 rear. I have a Dana 44 front out of a Rubicon Jeep that I picked up at the same junkyard where our frame came from. The one thing we do need to do is eliminate all these brackets because we're not going to use any of the factory suspension on our stretch from a TJ to an LJ.
We've loved our TJ. It's cool to have a TJ, but a little more length would rock. I had an LJ, and you know, the hard part about this is they didn't do the LJs till later. Our crate engines are only good for the early TJs due to emissions. So if we could solve that problem in this shop, that'd be awesome.
Well, the frame's upside down. We have a pile of brackets and grinding dust back here. We've got it all cleaned up. The motor mounts are off. All the suspension mounts are off. We're doing the full Mamba long arm kit on this thing, so we're not going to use any of that anyway. Before we flip this over and get it on the table, we're going to take some angle iron and weld it here before we take the skid plate off, because there's no cross members in the TJ frame. We don't want it to flex, and we want it to stay in square. Once we get it flipped over, we can get up on the table, measure, and cut the back off for the stretch kit.
I have done a lot of TJ to LJ conversions over the years. I've done like full tube buggies where we basically take a TJ and drop it on a race car chassis. I've taken full LJ tubs that I buy from the wrecking yard and put them on full tube chassis. And I've even just bought an LJ frame and stretched the TJ body. But this kit from GenRight Off-Road is honestly one of the most well thought out TJ to LJ conversions I've ever seen. Not only does it come with everything that we're gonna need, but it also addresses some of the key things that we're going to want to deal with this Jeep. Normally on a Jeep, stretch the frame, first thing you want to do is inboard your rear shock. So that means cutting the frame and putting some type of coilover or shock tower into the frame. Well, the GenRight kit solves that problem because their rear frame extension comes with shock towers that are automatically inboarded. It also kicks the frame up a little bit, so the angle is a little bit different, so I should get a little bit more ground clearance, and it allows us to mount our coilover shocks as high up as we can inside the tub. So we're able to run a nice long 14-inch shock and get a good amount of up travel even with a low vehicle. So my plan right now is to take all of this basically laser cut steel that looks like a giant puzzle, because that's what it is, and I'm going to turn it into a new rear frame section. But don't worry if you're doing this at home, the kit comes with a very extensive set of instructions and they're easy to follow.
While Ian's over there assembling the pieces of this kit, I'm gonna cut the frame. One of the cool things about it is it comes with this really simple template. You just line it up with this hole right here and mark where you make your cut.
We had a few years ago, before the world kind of got turned upside down, we started Cummins Cruise. So, you know, you have your power tours and you have all that, but we wanted to just activate some of these Cummins enthusiasts. And my maiden voyage on my personal vehicle was for Cummins Cruise. And it was literally, I got the exhaust done the night before and shook it down on a 4,500 mile drive around the country. And it was great. We had people that were able to do the whole thing with us, some that joined and dropped off, or others that joined, dropped off, and joined again. And we got to do it a couple of years, and I really hope we get to bring it back, because it was really great to connect directly with those end users and get a sense of like what their Cummins enables them to do, or why they chose Cummins. There's usually a good backstory. It's really rejuvenating to hear those stories firsthand and get to spend some time with those people.
Last time I saw this Jeep was actually when I was out on the Cummins cruise, which was kind of neat. You know, we packed a pile of miles on a bunch of different vehicles that have been repowered with the Cummins R2.8. So not only am I familiar with this Jeep from the standpoint that I know what it's about, I actually spent a lot of miles behind the wheel, and it really is a fun Jeep to drive. So I think the idea of saving this Jeep from the rust that's kind of eating away on the frame and some of the body is going to be great. And then to back it up, we have another Cummins vehicle that's pretty iconic that's going to come in a little bit later that we'll show you. And who knows, maybe it's time for another Cummins cruise with 2 vehicles this time. So now with the rear frame section on our frame table, we now need to level it up. So the idea here is simple. We're gonna square this rear section to where it keys into our original TJ frame. And then the instructions tell us to make this section of the frame extension perfectly level compared to the belly of the original TJ frame. Now there's a couple ways to do this. If you're doing this in your garage, what you do is you throw a couple jack stands underneath this round tube, and you can basically jack this bumper up and down, leaving the belly of it flat. But you know, I got a fab table, why don't I use it? So that's exactly what we're doing here. Front's clamped in place. I'll throw some shims underneath here until this reads exactly 0, check it against the frame up there, and then we'll tack it in place. But first, check it for square.
For the Cummins Wrangler here, we're ditching the short arm suspension, taking advantage of the increased length, and we're going with a Barnes 4-wheel drive long arm conversion. This kit works for LJ or TJ. On this Jeep, it's going to allow us to improve our geometry. Things will happen more slowly off-road. We'll get a better ride on-road, just all around better system. So our next step is to get the frame off the table, get it on some jack stands. We're going to slide our axles underneath and then start installing the suspension. It's time to build the suspension links, so before we do that, we wanted to put the axles in here, get them up at full bump, and get the drivetrain just temporarily placed back in here so we make sure we're not going to have any interference issues, place the link mounts where they need to go, and then we can start measuring and get to cutting and welding. That's it for this episode. We got a lot done in a little bit of time. We have the frame all lengthened. We've got the suspension mounts all tacked in, building our links. We've got the drivetrain temporarily installed. Next thing we're gonna do, we can't wait to see what it's gonna look like. So we rolled up the Nexen Rodian MTX tires up there. These are great tire. All the off-road mud terrain features you want for great off-road performance, yet they're still civilized on road and roll smooth down the highway. When our wheels show up, we'll get our tires installed, make it a rolling chassis, get the body on it, and make it a runner.